Cavern of Terror. Hello, and welcome to the Nightmare on Elm Street video. You're all my children now.
You know, sometimes when you record things and something happens to your computer so you have to start over again? Yeah, that's what happened to me while I was recording my Nightmare on Elm Street video. I'm so happy right now. Hey guys, and welcome back to the Cavern of Terror, and it is time, guys. It is finally time for me to do my overview of the Nightmare on Elm Street series. If you're new to the Cavern of Terror and this is your first video, welcome. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. Don't worry, it won't bite you. I have been hyping this up for a few months now. I'm going to finally go through this. And as I said in the other videos, I'm going to go through the first movie, the second movie, third movie, fourth movie, fifth movie, sixth movie, Wes Craven's New Nightmare, and the remake, guys. I'm going through the entire Nightmare, can't talk, A Nightmare on Elm Street series. And let me tell you something, this week has been so weird. It's been so... I found 4 scratches on my shoulder this morning, and I'll even show you. I'll show you what they look like. You see them there? I found 4 scratches on my shoulder this morning. My computer was acting weird earlier. I had a dream about Freddy the other day. Guys, there's something weird going on, so... if I disappear by the end of this video, we know that Freddy Krueger is real. So we're going to go and talk about the first of Nightmare on Elm Street. We're going to go to the second one. You get the deal. But first, we're going to take this hat off, because with this combo and this hat, yeah, not going to work. What we're going to do is we're going to go put this over here, and then we're going to get started.
Please, God. This is God.
Okay, so before we get into the first Nightmare on Elm Street, we're going to talk about something that I think every Nightmare on Elm Street fan needs, and that is the Never Sleep Again documentary. This Blu-ray is amazing, guys. It has basically every fact you would ever want to know about the Nightmare on Elm Street series. It's very similar to the Camp Crystal Lake Memories documentary about Friday the 13th. Actually, they're done by the same studio. These are really, really good. This is really, really good. It talks about every Nightmare on Elm Street, all of those interviews, basically every actor that you've ever heard of in the Nightmare on Elm Street series, every director is involved on this documentary. It is amazing. And it was something that I went and looked at a lot of times when I was writing my A Nightmare on Elm Street remake script. Yes, I have been writing a Nightmare on Elm Street remake script for a long time, and I figured it would be this video to tell you guys that I'm actually doing it. If you go over to my Instagram page, I'll put the link in the description box always, but I'll put a tag if I'll try to put a tag in this video so you can go straight over there and check out my content for it. But I went and watched this documentary, you know, when I was lost on the script, where I needed ideas. You know, just something to pull from to help me get my vision clear. This documentary is amazing, and it's something that every Nightmare on Elm Street fan needs to check out. If you watch that documentary, you'll hear that Wes Craven wrote this script, and it went around Hollywood for about 3 years before it was ever picked up by New Line Cinema. Him and Bob Shea, you know, they were a dream team for this. Without those two guys, I don't think this movie would have ever happened, but it became a classic. The original 1984 Nightmare on Elm Street belongs up there with Halloween. Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Black Christmas is one of the best early slasher movies in the slasher genre. And it's one of my favorites. As you can tell, that poster behind me is one of the original promo posters for A Nightmare on Elm Street. I believe that's what the description said. Yeah, this poster went around for a long time before the movie came out. And I absolutely love it. One of the main reasons why I got it is because of the blue and yellow. It's something that you don't really see with A Nightmare on Elm Street. It's usually red, usually green because of the, you know, Freddy Krueger shit. And I liked it because it was a different design. I love the blue, hence why I have the blue behind Freddy with my screen over there. Which you guys need to get yourself some lights for your television. Check it out. Not being sponsored. Vansky or Vansky, check them out. They're awesome. Anyway, I'll tell you why the first Nightmare on Elm Street is one of my favorite slasher movies. It's because it's so original. The original Nightmare on Elm Street was breaking boundaries in the horror genre back in the mid-80s. You had a slasher killer that wasn't afraid to talk. He didn't talk too much. He wasn't like Michael. He wasn't like Jason. He didn't silently chase you around. Freddy Krueger was here to talk to you and make you, freaked out because, he would be behind a tree and he'd be like, you'd be laughing back there or talking to you from outside your window. Tina. It's awesome, man. I love it. And one of the biggest reasons why Freddy Krueger is such a big icon is Robert Englund. Robert Englund embodies this role. He was Freddy Krueger. He still is Freddy Krueger to a lot of people. And I know we have Jackie Earle Haley who played him in the remake, and we will get there. We had one guy basically play Freddy Krueger the entire time throughout this series, even in New Nightmare when he wasn't really playing Freddy Krueger. It's not very often that one actor plays the same character in every single movie in a franchise. Even Doug Bradley, as much as he's been in the Hellraiser series, he has not played Pinhead in every single movie. He's been recast twice in that franchise. So Robert Englund has something special. And he's something special to the horror genre. He's something special to the horror fan base. I know so many people that just love his performance and want to make scripts that involve that version of the character, make stories that involve his version of the character. And that is an impact on the genre. And then, of course, you have Wes Craven. Wes Craven was already making headway in the horror genre in the 70s when he did Last House on the Left, when he did The Hills Have Eyes. Both really controversial movies at the time, especially Last House on the Left. But when he did A Nightmare on Elm Street, he changed the game. I mean, he brought in Robert Englund. He brought in a character that could get you in your dreams. He brought in a different way to look at the horror genre. In a slasher genre, where you had a character that was a slasher, that spoke, that got to you in your dreams, there was no way that you could stop him. You know what I mean? It got interesting. It was on at that point when Robert Englund and Robert Shea and the Wes Craven, they all got together and made this amazing horror movie. And then you have Charles Bernstein's music. Bum, 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 bum. Like that little riff I played on the guitar earlier. It's so weird and unique and awesome. Of course, we have the Halloween music. Dun, 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 dun. But there's something dreamlike about Charles Bernstein's music for A Nightmare on Elm Street. There is an amazing scene in the documentary where he talks about, notes being out of place. Bum, 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 bum. It just brings that dreamlike atmosphere to the movie. This also brought a lot of people to stardom. This brought Robert Englund to stardom. This gave Johnny Depp really his first big break in movies. Heather Langenkamp had a pretty successful television career after A Nightmare on Elm Street. She was on a show called Just the 10 of Us. And then, of course, she came back for A Nightmare on Elm Street 3. Of course, it would not be an Elm Street video if I didn't talk about the iconic scenes in the original A Nightmare on Elm Street. So we have the Johnny Depp bed pull where he gets sucked through the bed and then the blood comes out. Here's a clip of that because that is such an amazing scene. Just look. Really dope. I love that. He's calling for his mom. Mom, mom, mom. It's awesome. I love that scene. It's so scary to this day. Nancy knows that this is happening. Freddy was like,
I'm your boyfriend now.
And then, of course, you have the other iconic death in the first A Nightmare on Elm Street, and that is when Tina dies, and she gets drugged across the ceiling of her bedroom while Rod looks on. I'm gonna get you, motherfucker! I'm gonna get you! Tina! Tina! There's other scenes in the original Nightmare on Elm Street that are also iconic and striking, like you have Tina in the hallway in the high school, in the body bag, and she's being drugged across the hallway while Nancy watches. You have Nancy cowering in the corner of the boiler room while Freddy Krueger is coming and he's like, I'm gonna get you. Then you have, this is God. It's so cool, man. There's so many striking scenes in the original Nightmare on Elm Street. Yeah, you know, you have Freddy in the jail with Rod. You have Rod hanging by the noose. You have John Saxon as Lieutenant Thompson and Nancy hugging each other, looking as the mom floats down into the bed. It's such a striking movie visually. I mean, the cinematography is something in the first Nightmare on Elm Street that is barely ever talked about. I love the way that this movie looks. So there's a lot of things that went into the first Nightmare on Elm Street to make it a classic. I consider it a classic. It's one of my top favorite slasher movies of all time. And really, there's not much more I can say about A Nightmare on Elm Street than what anybody else has already told you. It's one of my favorites. I have a poster for a reason. I love Freddy Krueger. This is the movie that made him an icon for me. So really, that's all I got to say about the first Nightmare on Elm Street. So let's move on to A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2.
We got special work to do here, you and me.
I know a lot of people don't like this movie. And I don't know why, man. I get the gay undertones or overtones, whatever you want to call it, because it's pretty obvious there's a gay theme throughout this movie. Jesse is very clearly gay. This is another classic, in my opinion. I think the first two A Nightmare on Elm Street are true classics. I love just how fucking dark Freddy is in this movie. He's using Jesse's fear of being gay throughout the entire movie. If you don't believe me, watch it. He is using that alienation that Jesse feels. You know, his mom thinks that he's on drugs. His dad thinks that reality is going to help him. And, you know, it's very clear that everyone thinks he's gay. I mean, Grady thinks he's gay. I don't know if Lisa does, but, you know, that's very clearly a theme here. And I think it's okay, man. I think it's completely fine. And I don't think that is a reason not to like this movie, because I think A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2 is another classic, like I said. Until we get to the remake, I think that A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2, Freddy's Revenge, has the darkest version of Freddy. I mean, this dude's fucking scary in this one. And, you know, there's that scene, there's that iconic scene where Freddy rips off the top of his head and shows his brain, and he's like, you got the body, I got the brain. That's just fucking creepy, bro. And there's lots of other scenes in here that, you know, just show really good filmmaking. I mean, there's a scene where Lisa puts a red sweater and a green sweater back into the closet. You know, it's the parallels. It's the parallels of Freddy and Jesse. There's another scene where Jesse is walking out of his room and he has red pajama pants on against a green wall. I love that. The use of color in this movie for Freddy and Jesse, the green and red, is really interesting in the real world and not just in the nightmare sequences. But, you know, a lot of people say that this goes against the Craven Code and what he wrote in the first one. I like to think that this is similar to what We Watched the Movie said, what Mike and Jay said. This is just this one-off story about this kid who had his life fucking ruined by Freddy Krueger. You know, Freddy Krueger came in and he's like, I'm going to use your gayness against you. He basically takes Jesse Walsh's life and turns it into a living hell. And, you know, I wouldn't think that this character would be so iconic today if he wouldn't have been played by Mark Patton. Mark Patton knocked it out of the park in this movie. He was amazing. And unfortunately, he stopped acting after A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2. And I think he could have done a lot more things for Hollywood if he would have stayed in. I think that his character would have been awesome. And if his character would have came back in another Nightmare on Elm Street movie, I would have been completely on board with it because he's one of the strongest characters throughout the entire franchise. Of course, we have the changes to the mythos of Freddy Krueger in Part 2, but I don't really have a problem with it. Does it change any of the other sequels moving forward? Not really, no it doesn't. I really like this movie. I really like the paranoia in A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2. It's really, really on display. You know those awkward faces that the parents give throughout the series? I felt that was the entire movie with Jesse Walsh, with Mark Patton's character. And I think that that is a great thing because it makes it completely different from the rest of the series in tone. It's super creepy. This movie's super creepy. It's very dark. And it's really disturbing in some aspects. It's not all good. There are some practical effects, makeup scenes in this that are not great. I'm talking about the dog. I'm talking about the mutant rat at the end of the movie. Not too awesome, but the look of Freddy Krueger in Part 2 is amazing. I love the way that Robert Englund looks in this. I love the design, the male witch design of Freddy Krueger in Part 2. It's really striking, very, very creepy, and goes in more of a demonic direction. We have some amazing performances, like I said. Kim Myers. I think it's Kim Myers or is Kim Meyer? I can't remember her name, her last name. But she is awesome in this movie. I thought that she was great. I would have welcomed her to return in some of the other sequels as well. I love the character relationship between her and Jesse. Those two are so awesome in this. And then, of course, you have Grady. Grady is everybody's best friend. I love the character. He starts out as a dick and then becomes Jesse's best friend by the end of it. And I think he gets kind of a bad rap in this movie. I think he should have lived a lot longer. If you haven't seen Part 2, sorry there's going to be spoilers here. He died way too early for me. Lisa's friend wasn't in it enough for me. I can't even remember her name. I think she should have been in this movie a lot more. And then, of course, we have "They Are All My Children Now." We have that scene, which is amazing. It's so striking. And it's a really cool scene. Even if you don't like Part 2, Freddy's Revenge, you have to admit that's one of the best scenes in the whole franchise. As of right now, Freddy's Revenge is one of my favorites in the series. You can hate me all you want for it, but I love A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2. Let's talk about Part 3.
This is it, Jennifer. Your big break in TV. Welcome to prime time, bitch.
A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3 Dream Warriors is probably one of the most well-known, well-loved A Nightmare on Elm Street films in the whole franchise. This is the one, I know it's Cody Leach's favorite. I know Drum Dums really likes this one. So I don't know how CP feels about it or Brian Limex. I haven't watched those videos in a long time from those guys. But the Stream boys really like Part 3. And I do too, to a point. And I'll get to that because this movie's great. This movie is really, really, really good. It came out in 1987. And this was the beginning of the more comedic Freddy. And I thought that Robert Englund was good in Part 3. I really, really do. I think he was riding the line of the comedic Freddy and the dark Freddy. I really like the one-liners. I mean, come on, guys. This is it, Jennifer. Your big break in TV. Welcome to prime time, bitch. Like, I love that line. It's so good. And I'm just going to let you guys hear his version of it as well. Take it away, Robert.
This is it, Jennifer. Your big break in TV. Welcome to prime time, bitch.
That was way better than mine. But that's what I'm talking about. That line right there is the only one throughout the entire series that was improvised by Robert Englund. And that just shows how inventive this movie was. I mean, going into the practical effects, going into the characters, going into Robert Englund doing his own line there. It was originally just, this is your big break in TV, and then he just throws her into the TV. No, he says, this is it, Jennifer, this is your big break in TV, welcome to prime time, bitch, and then just throws her into the TV. That's dope. You have some really good practical effects here. You have, like, the tendons coming out of Peter as he's walking down the hall. Philip as he's walking down the hall. That just looks, I don't know why I called him Peter. I have no idea. But that just looks painful as hell. And this one is really about the characters. It's more about the characters than the special effects. Because I know the special effects are great in Part 3. But this has the Dream Warriors. This has, Taryn. Oh, She's just so hot in this movie. I'm telling you, I'm being completely honest. I got the movie Bad Dreams just because Jennifer Rubin is in it. Because she is so incredibly hot in part 3. You don't believe me? Here, look at this. See that? Yeah, you see that right there? Don't doubt me. Bad Dreams was basically just a Nightmare on Elm Street clone. Yeah, got it because of Jennifer Rubin. Then you have Joey, you have Kincaid, you have Kristen, who's played by the amazing Patricia Arquette. I know she had a lot of problems with this movie with the acting and the hours and everything. You know, being up late. This was a really, really tough schedule for these guys. They were up at all hours for this. But these characters were just really, really awesome because of the performances. Kincaid, you know, we're going to kick his ass all over Dreamland. I thought that line is awesome. You know, you have Nancy. You have Leather Canningham. You have Heather Langenkamp coming back to part 3. I literally called her Leather Canningham. I'm sorry. But then you have Nancy coming back in part 3 as this badass that went to school and learned about dreams, and she's going to help these kids take out Freddy Krueger for the last time. And I just thought it was dope, man. She came back, and I thought that she was awesome. I thought that she was really great in part 3, and that has to do with the writing. You know, Wes Craven's story that was redone by Frank Darabont and Chuck Russell. And her character is just really strong. She's a really strong female lead character in this movie that really helps these kids. And it shows in her performance. She's incredibly strong in every scene. And my favorite scene in the whole movie with Heather Langenkamp is the one where she goes into Kristen's dream. And the Freddy worm is there. And she sees the Freddy worm and she's like, oh my god, it's just so cool, man. It's really, really powerful. That is a very cinematic scene. There's a lot of those throughout this movie. This is one of the most visually appeasing movies in the franchise. It looks really cool, especially the scenes where, you know, Joey is held up on the bedposts with the tongues on his arms, which is another awesome scene with the nurse. Yeah, it's just a lot of positives with A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3. The biggest negative with Part 3 is how over the top they get with the kills, how over the top they go with the nightmare sequences in Part 3. Because as we'll go throughout the franchise, they just have to keep one-upping each other and one-upping each other and one-upping each other until it gets so out of control that Freddy's just not really scary anymore. And that unfortunately starts in Part 3. So, I mean, I love Part 3. Dream Warriors. I'm on a Dream Warriors shirt. You can check it out over at the Drum Dum's Spreadsheet store. He's got a picture done by the amazing Woody Bowen of the Dream Warriors and the Killer Flicks Army. Of course, I was not going to leave the Part 3 section of this video without talking about the Dream Warriors song from Dawkins. Guys, this song made me love Dawkins. I have a Dawkins Greatest Hits out in the truck, and I listen to it pretty much every other day because Dream Warriors is such a badass song. In the video was way ahead of its time. The video actually became really famous because of this movie. And it's just a fitting song for the series. If you go back, listen to it, my advice would be listen to this song right now after you're done with this video because it's so classic. Dawkins.
You think you've got what it takes? I've been guarding my gate for a long time, bitch.
This is where the series gets really interesting, and usually not in a good way. This is A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 4, The Dream Master. Am I a fan of this movie? Yes. Yes, I do like this movie, but it's got a shitload of problems. The biggest problem being with A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 4 is that the script was not completed when they went into production. They were writing scenes the day before they shot them. And that's not a good thing. That's definitely not a good thing. And I feel like the character development got left on the table. You know, it wasn't brought into the production. So you got the characters from Part 3 that came in, and they're well fleshed out because we already know who they are. And parts of the new characters like Alice and Rick are pretty well developed because they're more the main focus of the movie. But then you have the side characters like Dan, Alice's eventual boyfriend, and the girl that becomes the cockroach. I can't quite remember her name right now. But those two characters weren't very developed at all. And I think that's because the script is so weak. But fortunately, A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 4 is saved by these really, really kick-ass dream sequences. They are really awesome. I mean, the cockroach scene alone is so good. I mean, you got the girl working out, and all of a sudden Freddy shows up, and she starts turning into a fucking cockroach. It's awesome. I mean, you have the wanna suck face scene where Freddy, sucks the air out of the girl. I forget her name. I want to call her Yvonne, but it's not Yvonne because Yvonne is in Part 5. I can't remember the girl's name, but the air comes out of her and she just turns into this emaciated corpse, and it's really cool. And then you have, the nightmare sequence in the diner with the soul food, and Freddy be like, "Ooh, I love soul food," and that's just really cool. You have the movie theater sequence. You have Joey and the water bread. That's really fucking cool. That Billy Idol song just makes that, that scene just that much more awesome. You have Kincaid's death, and I know Kincaid's death pisses a lot of people off, but it's actually really cool when the camera pulls out and you see that the whole world has become a junkyard maze. That's really, really dope as well. And like I said, this movie is pretty much saved by these really elaborate dream sequences. But the story really suffers. The story is one of the main reasons why I rank this one pretty low in the actual ranking of the series. I would say that Part 5 is actually better than Part 4. It didn't really click with me that this movie was so much of a mess until I just watched it in preparation for this video. You got the weak characters. You got the storyline that really isn't there. There isn't much of a story to Part 4. It's just elaborate dream sequence after elaborate dream sequence after elaborate dream sequence. You have the main core of the story is them trying to take down Freddy. But the characters aren't developed enough. At least not all of them. And you have a story that, is very weak. And I can't blame them personally. But, the studio wanted to pump this movie out and make a lot of money, and they did. It made Rennie Harlan a star, and, I can't blame them for it, but of course we got a subpar movie in the franchise because of that. And that's why I rank Part 4 below some of the other movies in the franchise. But I'll tell you that Freddy is actually really cool in Part 4. I think that he's funny in Part 4. I think he's actually better in Part 4 than he is in Part 3. Don't kill me. But yeah, I actually prefer Robert Englund more in Part 4 than Part 3. I like the, how's this for a wet dream? How's this for a wet dream? Ha 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 ha! I thought that was awesome. You have really cool sequences in Part 4. But ultimately, as a movie in a franchise, it fails. This is an awesome, awesome music video. But it's not a really great movie in whatsoever. I mean, there's a lot of good things in it, but it's not really a movie to me. I consider this more of a fan film of A Nightmare on Elm Street more than an actual movie in the franchise.
It's a boy!
Of course, that brings us to A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 5, The Dream Child. Guys, I have a rough story with this movie in the franchise. I went into Part 5, clearly thinking that I was going to not like this movie. Clearly thinking that I was going to have a bad time. I actually posted this on Killer Flicks. And if you want to go over to Killer Flicks, it's facebook.com/Killer Flicks. Tell them that your boy sent you. It's a horror group where we talk about nothing but horror all the time. Free for all Fridays on Friday where we can talk about anything. But mostly, it's horror. And I posted a certain post about A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 5. Where I was like, I went into this movie thinking that I was going to hate it. And I actually really, really liked Part 5 when I watched it again. I watched it the first time and I did not like the movie. It just did not connect with me. But this last time that I watched A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 5, it really worked. I think that Alice was amazing. I thought that Lisa Wilcox as Alice was 50,000 times better in Part 5 than she was in Part 4. I thought the story was better in Part 5. I think if the MPAA didn't butcher the shit out of this movie, I think it would be more loved because the kills would have been, that much better. I thought Dan's death was awesome, and his character was so much more developed from being in part 4 and into part 5 that I really, really was devastated when the character left because I really, really liked Dan. I thought he was a cool character. And, the motorcycle death is just fucking crazy. It's so brutal. And if you watch the extended version of that death, you'll be like, holy shit, I totally agree. Then you have Gretchen's, I think her name's Gretchen, or I think it's Gretchen. Her death, Supermodel's death, where Freddy starts feeding her. The extended version where he's feeding her herself. He's feeding her intestines of her own. That's fucking brutal, man. And, this is actually Robert Englund's favorite in the franchise as well. I think I read that in an interview where he said that he really preferred part 5, and I can see why. Because this is really the darkest film in the franchise other than part 2. This deals with, abortion and some, really, really messed up subjects. The scene where Dan's parents are talking to Alice, and they're like, "Hey, we want to raise this kid. We don't think you can do it." I was like, "Bro, this is rough," and it really brought me into it. I know that the character that plays Mark, the actor that plays Mark, wasn't the strongest in this movie, but I really felt for his character too. Like after the girl that he loved died, he was really, really heartbroken and wanted to take out Krueger. I was invested. I was really invested. I really liked that they brought Amanda Krueger back from the end of part 3 and from the end of part 4 for part 5. It's like an unofficial trilogy in the Nightmare on Elm Street series with 3, 4, and 5. And the fact that she ultimately helps Alice take out Krueger. I thought it was dope. In that post on Killer Flicks, I talked about how I think New Line knew they messed up with part 4, where they had amazing visuals and amazing death sequences, but they didn't have the greatest story. So they really focused on the story for part 5. They made it very cohesive. They corrected the flaws with part 4. And I think it shows tenfold in part 5. Now, Dream Child is not all great. There are some questionable scenes, especially with some scenes with Freddy near the end are kind of weird, but there are some dialogue moments and some story beats in this that don't make any sense, because there is a scene where Alice is trying to explain to her new friends about, Freddy Krueger, and they don't believe her. Don't you remember that Dan died? Don't you remember, Rick, her brother, dying, and Kristen and Joey and all these characters from part 4 that died? You don't remember that at all? That doesn't make any sense to me. But in the end, part 5 is a more cohesive, better acted, better directed movie than part 4. And you can come at me all you want, but I got about 50 or 60 people that completely agree. I don't know. I guess the stars aligned and I really liked part 5.
That's it, put it on. Feels good, doesn't it?
Oh boy, guys, it is time to talk about Freddy's Dead. Nightmare on Elm Street Part 6. This movie is not good. Just with Part 5, I thought that Part 5 was going to be bad, and it actually, surprised me. It was better than I thought it was going to be, but Part 6, Freddy's Dead, has not gotten better over the years. If anything, it's gotten worse. This movie was just not good, and there's a lot of things that went into it. I mean, Rachel Talalay, the director of the movie, got sick halfway through, and a producer ended up directing the rest of the movie. That's not a good sign. I just didn't think it was any good, man. There are some things in it that make sense on paper. And, I liked learning about Freddy's backstory. I liked all the flashback sequences with, an unburned Robert Englund. I thought that was really cool. Springwood becoming this town where parents are, still there but afraid to have kids. This whole town that is childless because they're afraid that Freddy Krueger is going to take their kids. That sounds great on paper. Holy shit, guys, this movie is not good. It's just not good. There's some things in it that I like, but I mean, the biggest thing that I really like about part 6 is Lisa Zane. I thought that Lisa Zane was good in this movie. If you don't know who she is Billy Zane's sister. Billy Zane is an awesome actor from the 80s and 90s. I thought he is one of my favorites of the old school actors. But his sister is the main character in this movie. That's one of the biggest issues with part 5 or part 6. I don't know why I keep saying the wrong movie, but part 6 is that there's no truly defined main character. You know, you have John Doe, you have Lisa Zane's character, you have this blonde chick that comes on later in the movie and becomes a sort of lead character near the end. You have Doc, which is actually a really cool character. I really liked him. I think there are aspects of part 6 that could make this movie really, really great. But I don't know what happened. I think it's because they lost their director, or the stories, they cut too much out of it. That's another big thing here. It feels like there's huge chunks missing from Freddy's Dead. You know, there's a scene that I can tell you about right now, is the first nightmare that John Doe has in the home for these kids. He has the nightmare, and then all of a sudden he's in a room with Lisa Zane, and it looks like they've already had a 5-minute conversation that we didn't get to hear, and that's just not good. It doesn't work for me. Freddy looks like bubblegum in this movie. Like, they got the original guy, or not the original guy, but I think the guy that did the makeup for part 3 or 4, I can't remember. He didn't really work on the makeup too much. It did not end up looking good. Freddy looks like bubblegum in part 6. The nightmares aren't that great. You know, they're very, very tame. You know, the one where they're driving around in circles, that's from part 4. So they took something that was really good in part 4 and just did it again in part 6. And there was no, no change to it. It was just the same thing again. But they didn't realize that they were going in circles like they did in part 4. Then there's another scene which is actually awesome. It's Carlos's death with the nails on the chalkboard and his head exploding. I thought that was really cool. I'll show you a clip of that right here. That's probably one of the only things about part 6 that, man, is any good. I mean, you got Lisa Zane, you got parts of the story, you got the really cool death, but in the end, Freddy's Dead is just a waste of a sequel, in my opinion. It's just not good. I've never liked this movie, and I don't think I'm ever going to. I'm sorry, Drewski. I can't do it. I cannot do it. I really don't like part 6. In the end, with Freddy's Dead, I don't think that it was the story that is the problem. I think that it's the editing, because I know that Rachel Talalay, the director, had actually admitted that they cut a lot out of this movie. They cut out a lot of the beginning. They cut out a lot of the character development, a lot of, what made you really care about the characters in this movie. I know that I really didn't care about anybody other than Lisa Zane by the end of this. And that's just one of the main reasons why I am probably never going to like this movie. Sorry, Andrew.
Miss me?
Moving on from the trash fire. Sorry, guys. If you like Freddy's Dead, wow. We're going to move on to Wes Craven's New Nightmare, guys. This is one of my favorite A Nightmare on Elm Street movies. And this is really a precursor to Scream. They brought back Wes Craven, and he watched all the movies in the franchise, and he was like, I don't know how to save this, so I'm just going to do something completely different. And what he had done is actually brought Freddy into the real world. Heather Langenkamp came back, and she played Heather Langenkamp. You had Robert Shea in this. You had one of the other producers from New Line in this. You had Wes Craven in this. You had Robert Englund as Robert Englund. You had Jesus Garcia from the original. You had a bunch of actors that play characters in A Nightmare on Elm Street at the funeral scene for Heather Langenkamp's husband. This movie was nuts. And I love it. I love the super meta take on this character that, Freddy Krueger isn't really in this movie. He's actually a demon that's taken on the look of Freddy Krueger. And he's loved being this character. And he wants to take Heather Langenkamp's son. And it's just this super dark story. It really plays on the Grimm tales. It plays on Hansel and Gretel. And I really, really liked it. I liked the story of this. I know it gets crazy near the end because you don't know what's in the real world and what isn't. For example, there's a scene where John Saxon and Heather Langenkamp are in Heather Langenkamp's house, and she's talking to Dylan, her son, and she talks about Freddy Krueger, and John Saxon says, "Really?" And then he says, "I need to talk to you, Nancy." And I was like, "Whoa, what?" They go outside, and John Saxon turns around. Heather Langenkamp looks at him, and he's dressed exactly like he is in the original Nightmare on Elm Street. He's got the policeman's shield on his belt, and he's talking to Heather Langenkamp like she is Nancy. And when he leaves, she turns around, and her house has become the Nightmare on Elm Street house. 1428 Elm Street. That is fucking awesome. I love how they brought the whole series full circle in New Nightmare. It really worked for me. And I think Heather Langenkamp was at her strongest in this franchise. She certainly is gorgeous in New Nightmare. If you don't believe me, check the pictures out. She looks amazing in this movie. You have a lot of really good actors in this. I like the actor that played her husband. He wasn't actually her husband. Her husband is a makeup artist for real. Miko Hughes, the boy from Pet Sematary, he was really awesome in this movie as well. But there's some people that can't quite get into it because, the actors, the people that play their characters in this movie are the actual people. So Robert Shea plays Robert Shea. Wes Craven plays Wes Craven. And I know that can take some people out of it because their acting isn't that great. But just imagine if they were played by actual actors. It would feel cheap to me because then you would have Heather Langenkamp playing Heather Langenkamp, but everyone else is played by an actor. That just cheapens it for me. But I thought this movie was super creepy. I loved the meta take on it. I loved the story of trying to keep Freddy Krueger contained inside the Nightmare on Elm Street series, which keeps the demon from coming out. I thought that was really cool. The deaths in this movie aren't the greatest, but that's not really the point of New Nightmare. New Nightmare has a much deeper story than that. And that's why I really, really like this one. It's like my number 2. I really, really like New Nightmare. And in the end, it really works for me. And it kind of brought back Wes Craven's career because like 2 years later, he did Scream. And man, I don't think there would be a Scream without New Nightmare. I thought that Robert Englund was great in this movie as himself and as the new Freddy Dream Demon type of character in this. The one thing that I laugh at every time is the fact that the Dream Demon Freddy wears like biker boots and leather pants. That doesn't make any sense. He could have dressed more like Freddy. But I love the overcoat. Love the look of this movie. I really like the look of Freddy in this. I like the more demonic version of him. I thought that was really cool. In the end, guys, this is one of my favorites. I really, really like this movie. This is one that I always go back to. And if you haven't seen New Nightmare, you need to check it out because it is badass.
You really shouldn't fall asleep in class.
So we have arrived, guys. We are on that movie in the franchise. We are on the remake. And this one might be more, down the line with every single fan of this franchise. You either love this movie or you hate this movie. This one is more divisive than Part 5. It's more divisive than Freddy's Dead. It's more divisive than Freddy's Revenge. It's more divisive than New Nightmare. I know a lot of people that don't like New Nightmare. And, man, this movie isn't bad. I don't hate the remake. I really, really don't hate the remake. There's a lot of things that it does wrong, but there's a lot of things that it does right too. I actually just watched this movie today, so it's still fresh in my memory. One thing that I'm going to lay out to you right now, Jackie Earle Haley is not bad as Freddy Krueger. He is not bad as Freddy Krueger. It's everything around him that's not good. There's a lot of things in this story that just don't work. I mean, the full-on pedo thing doesn't work. You know, I was kind of into it in this third or fourth. I think it's like the sixth time I've seen this movie. I haven't seen it too many times, but it worked for me this time. I thought it was okay. I thought it was really dark. I thought it was really creepy. And I'm just going to say that Jackie Earle Haley did a great job as Freddy Krueger. I thought he was great in this movie. I thought that he was dark. I thought he was creepy. I thought he was funny. I was just petting him. I thought that was really awesome. I thought he was really good in it. I liked the look of him. I liked the burn victim look. I know a lot of people don't like that. I thought he brought, you know, his own version of the character to life. And he did pay respects to Robert Englund. And I remember watching the special features where he talked about, you know, watching videos of real serial killers to get into the role for Freddy Krueger. I thought that was really cool. So he took a more realistic approach to the character. He's got some really, really funny lines in this, like "found you" or "boo," or like there was that one scene in the closet where Nancy's in the closet and she's looking out for Freddy, and then all of a sudden he's right beside her. He says "boo," and she just freaks out, and he destroys the fucking closet. Personally, for me, I would have been like, what are we looking at? Like, I think that would have been a little bit better, but you know, to each their own with that scene. But he was really good in this movie. I really liked it. Moving on to the rest of the cast, I thought that Kyle Gallner, I thought he was really good in this. I thought that Katie Cassidy was really good, and she is actually supposed to be Tina from the original. Her name is Christina, but they call her Chris instead of Tina in this one. Jesse is obviously a Rod and Jesse Walsh a mixture from part 2 in the original. So he wears the leather jacket like Rod, but his name is Jesse. And Quentin is obviously Glenn. There's no John Saxon type character in this, which is okay. He's kind of replaced by Quentin's father, who's played by Clancy Brown, who's always awesome, and he was great in this movie. And Nancy's mom is played by the woman from American Horror Story. Can't remember her name right now, but she was really good in this as well. And then you have the direction of Samuel Bayer. And I thought he was good. He was a music video director. And you kind of need someone like that to do a Nightmare on Elm Street movie. Someone that's really good with visuals. Because when you go into the dreamscape, things are different. I like the fact that, you know, the colors change. And that's how you tell that you're in a nightmare. Or like the water condensation goes up on the cup instead of down. Or when Nancy comes out of the bathroom and she walks into her room and there's snow everywhere. I thought that was really interesting. Another thing that I really enjoyed about this one was the micro naps. I like that they could be asleep while they're awake. That's kind of like the daydreaming thing from part 4 that really wasn't developed enough because of the story. So I thought that was really interesting as well. One of my favorite nightmare sequences in this movie is Kyle Gallner's character, Quentin, while he's in the bookstore and the computer goes into sleep mode and he wakes up into a dream. I think that was really interesting. That was a really, really cool way to use technology without making it a huge plot device. That's what I don't want to see. I don't want to see Freddy coming out of a fucking YouTube screen or something like that. I want to see them using technology the right way. And I think A Nightmare on Elm Street 2010 did that right. Now for the story, do we really want to show Freddy as a pedophile? I don't think so. I don't think we need to do that. Just make him really dark. Have him kill kids. That's already dark enough. You don't need to really go there because then you can't really root for the character. Over the years, we've ended up rooting for Jason Voorhees. We ended up rooting for Michael Myers. We ended up rooting for Chucky. We ended up rooting for Leprechaun, all these characters. And you can't really get behind a pedophile. I'm just saying, you can't really do that. So it didn't work for me. It doesn't work for me. There's a lot that does work for me in this, and that just doesn't. But in the end, I'm a big fan of the remake. I like the remake. And I think a lot more people would like it more if they didn't go the direction they did with Freddy. Going back to Samuel Bayer as the director in the direction of the dream sequences, I thought that Kellen Lutz kill at the very beginning with the knife was really dope. I thought that was really cool. I thought that the scene where they burned Freddy was really awesome. I thought that the whole showdown with Nancy and Freddy at the end was really cool. The scene in the drugstore was amazing as well, with the big tracking shot of her in the boiler in the actual, store fading in and out of frame. That was really cool as well. This movie has a lot of good parts to it and a lot of bad parts. So it's shitty and good, to quote Jay from We Watched a Movie when he was talking about the Nightmare remake. It's shitty and good at the same time. But yeah, I like the remake of A Nightmare on Elm Street. It's not terrible, but it's not the greatest. It had a lot of really cool ideas, and unfortunately, it kind of failed. But I don't know why that stops people from making another one. Just make another one. That's why I'm writing one right now. I want to see this character come back. So that's my thoughts on the A Nightmare on Elm Street remake. Okay, guys, so there you have it. That has been my thoughts on the Nightmare on Elm Street series. A video that's been like 3 months in the making. I am very, very sorry that I haven't got this video out to you sooner. But this was a big project, man. I had to watch a lot of movies to do this one. And I'm really happy that I finally have my definitive video out there for this series. It's one of my favorite series in horror, and I'm so happy that I finally have this video out there for you. So what do you guys think of the Nightmare on Elm Street series? Give me your rankings down in the comments down below. Eventually, I will do a ranking video of the Nightmare on Elm Street series, since I've seen all the movies now. And doesn't mean I haven't seen them before, it's just I finally did my definitive video, so now I can do a ranking video. And just let me know where you would rank all these movies in the comments down below. If you're new to the Cavern of Terror, like I said, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Don't worry, it won't bite you. And if you want to see more of my new content, which includes more overviews, some other new topic videos, make sure you hit that notification bell. That way you can see all of my new content. If you want to get yourself a badass Cavern of Terror t-shirt, make sure you check out the Spreadshirt store link in the description box down below. Me and the man Woody Bowen have been working on some badass designs, and they are all on that website for you to check out. If you want to check me out on social media, you can find the links to all those accounts in the description box down below. But most importantly, guys, my name's Zach. This has been the Cavern of Terror.
Ha 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 ha! Stay metal, my friends.